I'm Flash Rosenberg, and I'm an attention span for hire, which means I shoot, draw, write, and talk.
Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and this is AART, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. This is Season 2, Episode 22. My guest this week is the multimedia artist Flash Rosenberg, who describes herself as an attention span for hire, and she photographs, draws, writes, and talks as a performer. Flash was the pioneering artist in residence for Live from the New York Public Library for 7 years, capturing live drawings of literary discussions in real time to create panels and animated summaries known as conversation portraits. Flash was born in Mount Vernon, New York, one of 3 children. She has a younger brother and sister, to Marilyn, an early childhood educator, and David, a chemical engineer and rocket scientist. Her family moved to Delaware when she was 4 years old, and later she attended the University of Delaware, where she graduated with a BS in graphic design as a Dean's Scholar in visual communication. In 2011, she was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in the creative arts. Her animations have been commissioned for Broadway shows. Her main stage stories for The Moth have been broadcast nationally on NPR. Flash Think Cartoons was a weekly online feature on the Condé Nast site archetypes.com. Flash has had an elaborate and original teaching career, specializing in provocative approaches to art, including workshops in visual humor, and a perception studies class conducted entirely in the New York City subways for Cooper Union. Flash lives in Harlem, New York. Flash, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
It sounds like you're a New Yorker through and through.
My studio is based in Harlem. I was raised in Delaware, and there's not that many people in Delaware, so if you meet another one, you got to give one back. But I've been in New York for over 30 years. I think I was a New Yorker before I even moved here. It's just something that's in your soul, and then you land.
It seems to be that way. I've spoken to a number of guests who are from New York, and it seems to be that it's in your blood. So what makes up a New Yorker then, if it's in your blood?
Well, when I was 14, I was walking down Main Street in Newark, Delaware, where I was being raised. And I never say I grew up because I've not yet consented to grow up. But I went into the newsstand and got a Village Voice. And I thought, wow, I want to go where the ink is coming out of that bucket. And so it was sort of an aim of mine, although I was in Philadelphia, very happily so, for about 14 years before I made it to New York, because I had a business and I was in love there. And why does anybody move anywhere for love or money or the hope for those things?
So what were you doing in Philadelphia?
Well, I was making movies. I had a art clown company called Flash Artists that had up to 44 people on roster, and we dressed in costume. This is during the 80s, kind of David Bowie-esque little clown outfits. And we went to every conceivable kind of event and took Polaroids and made them into favors to give to people, like life-size photographic masks with 8x10 prints, or buttons, magnets, mirrors, keychains, yo-yos, or anything that was interactive. I really had a big belief that I wanted to bring the joy of my creating art to others as a gesture, as something live. So there's always been the theatrical component to the artwork that I do.
Did you have influence from your parents when it comes to art?
Very much so. I mean, we moved to New York, and there was a lot of homes that were like Levittown style houses, and we went to see all our relatives were still in New York. And when we came back, somebody pulled up a truck and robbed the house. My mother said she wasn't particularly funny or even thought of herself as an artist, but she goes, well, I guess it's a dance studio now. And with the insurance money, she bought a piano, and our living room was a dance studio. And she liked being creative. She was an early childhood educator, and she said all humans should be respected. She says, never have kids glue macaroni to construction paper. No one needs that. And she had one time I went to her class. She had 10 3-year-olds from like 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and they very peacefully obeyed or listened to or gladly did whatever she was suggesting. And I thought, no matter how successful I might ever be as a performer, I will never have that kind of command of an audience. And my father was, I come from a long line of what is known as the funny guy at work. Only I forgot to get work as a lifelong freelancer. I had one job at the Delaware Art Museum in 1979, and I've been living by my wits and hopes ever since.
Well, you were born in 1954 in Mount Vernon, New York. What were your very earliest memories then of childhood? Eldest of 3 children. So give us some idea what those very early years, how they were colored in your life.
Well, I mean, I was funny before I knew it because I liked theories of how things worked. And so when we were moving from New York to Delaware, I cried the whole way. I was 4 years old, and my mother thought I was car sick or something. And I said, no, I thought if you moved away from where you were born, you would have to be that age all your life, and I would be 4 forever. Turns out I was right.
With your mother being an early childhood educator, was she strict with you? Marilyn, we're talking about now. Was she strict with you?
No, she negotiated. She was not strict. She didn't require us to obey. In fact, she loved to be entertained by her kids. And so we learned to use humor and be adorable. I mean, another whole factor in all this is that there were very few Jews in Delaware. And we weren't particularly religious, but the general sensation was be likable so people will like Jews. It wasn't really a crusade. We didn't run around boasting about it, but it was just kind of a way to be helpful, to be funny, to be playful and generous. And those are qualities that I try to bring to my artwork.
Has that sensitivity to your religion carried through into adulthood?
I think so. I mean, I very much like to say, well, it could be this way and it could be that way. I mean, an example is the first day of school, we were learning to read, and books went the usual way in America, opening up on the left, and you read, from left to right. And that very afternoon, I went to Hebrew school, and you opened up books from the other side. Next thing I know, we're studying men in bathrobes leading the people, Abraham or Moses, and they looked like my dad at night. I figured they went home and put on a suit and tie to go to bed. And I thought that Judaism was not particularly a religion, but it was this sensation that the exact opposite of everything you know could happen, and it would still be all right.
And your father, David, was a chemical engineer and rocket scientist, so a true academic, I would imagine. What sort of influence did he have on your childhood?
Well, he was smart. He would bring home things from work. Like, he was one of the few men in his bridge club, because Jews weren't allowed to be hired for corporations back in the 50s and 60s. And he had this job, and his friends sold shoes, they sold jeans, they sold newspapers, and that was his card, the guys in the played cards with. And he would bring home like the foam stuff that you packed rocket motors in. And he was just a boy who dreamed of going to the moon. So he became a propulsion scientist to figure out, how do you launch something? He said, actually, it was quite easy to go to the moon. The hard part was bringing them home, because you couldn't launch something in zero gravity as far as they knew at the time. That's why they wrote, the rockets circled around the moon, and then they went up and down on a rope. Because you couldn't particularly launch. So we would talk about different science things, but a lot of his work was secret. There was high security clearance and all that, because a lot of rocket science was also involved with details for the military, which was a source of some contention when I became more radical during the Vietnam War and things like that. But, he said he was all about the science, and he was amusing. He loved to tell jokes. So he put out, after he retired, he put out something called a Rosiegram, which was, that back in the early internet where people shared jokes, because we weren't really sure what it was for. Now when somebody sends me jokes, I think, who has time for that?
So what's their backstory then, Flash? Where did your parents come from?
Well, they met in high school. They were high school sweethearts. in Mount Vernon, New York. And so, they got married at 23 and had me when they were 25.
And how about your grandparents? Because often we favor one grandparent or another. What was your relationship with your grandparents?
Very, very close. My grandfather was pretty much my best friend. So,
on which side?
On my mother's side. And he was so funny because I couldn't, he was living in New York. I was in Delaware, and I couldn't wait to learn how to write because I wanted to write Papa a letter. So I wrote a letter, which any kid would do, and say, "Dear Papa, I'm fine. The weather's fine. Hope you're fine." And he wrote back, "Most people aren't fine. The weather is seldom fine. And if you're going to go to the trouble to write a letter, say something." Best writing advice I ever got.
Great advice. So some early influences then in terms of, humor. As you said, your dad had a sense of humor.
Yeah, my mother did too, but hers was guileless. She was just funny, and then she loved to laugh at herself when it was revealed that she had just said a funny thing. Like when computers first came out, they were sold at auto parts stores. So we went down to the Penn Jersey car parts place, and, we had a mission. Mom had to get a dedicated piece of equipment for my father's computer. And she marches up to the counter and says, "Sir, I need an urge suppressor for my husband." And the whole place cracks up. And she cracks up too. She goes, "Well, I thought that's what it was." And to this day, I think of all those surge suppressors as urge suppressors.
And so talk a little bit about, what your influences were when you were growing up, like in school, the kind of things that you were attached to, and were you particularly drawn to art when you were a young child?
Always drawn to art. I just loved to draw. And because my mother was an early childhood educator, she was impressed that I could draw faces so completely so early. I just love to look at things. It's a sense of observation. It's why I've earned a lot of my being able to afford to live indoors from being an event photographer, because it's like having a day off. I don't have to have an opinion about anything. I don't have to invent anything. I just have to be keenly aware, like it's a gymnasium for the aware, to go and see what's going on. And I feel like I'm actually part detective and part vacuum cleaner, because I'm looking around at any event and I know who I've already seen and who I've photographed. So I'm extremely complete in getting everybody who's there. And that part of it is interesting. I think if I wasn't an artist, I would have been a detective. I love figuring things out. And, so I would always, I went to the art room during lunch. I was really good friends with art teachers all the way through, including in college, where I had this wonderful mentor in photography. Because back then, when you wanted to draw something, you had these swipe files. You went through magazines and ripped out magazine pictures of somebody sitting, somebody looking sad, somebody holding their head. Then you could refer to those images to make drawings. Well, I thought if I had photography skills, I could pose my own to do my swipe file drawings from, and then got enchanted with what photography can do. But I never abandoned one thing for another. Like when I tell people I do photography, drawing, writing, and performing, they go, "But which one do you do?" And the thing is, I do them all because they're required, because ultimately I make animations, and you have to be able to understand time arts. You have to be able to write a script. You have to be able to draw and have the photo technology to capture the thing to make the animation. So all components are needed. There's not like a preference. But when I went to the University of Delaware, all I wanted to do in life at that time was get out of Delaware. And what do you know? I got a full scholarship to the University of Delaware. So I'm in my room crying, and my parents are opening up the Asti Spumante. And back then they had college catalogs. And when I went to the school, they said, well, the state of Delaware has a moral obligation to educate its citizens. So if you want to major in something we don't offer, we'll pay the difference for you to go somewhere else. I thought, well, how hard can it be to major in something they don't offer? So I went to the Dean of Arts and Sciences and said, I want to major in a question. I don't want to be an or an ist. I don't want to be a philosopher or a photographer or a scientist or an artist. No or ist. I said, I want to know how we know the things we know when we haven't been told. And I said, and that's video production, it's philosophy, it's sociology, it's writing, it's photography. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to MIT. I'm going to be able to go into perception sciences. And the dean, to my great gratitude all these years later, said, you can stay right here and write your own curriculum. You just have to write a page about why you need to take that, so that you have a focused course of study. So that worked out very well for me, because that is, in fact, what I ended up doing for my whole life. And, in order to survive, I've what I call jobbing out the skill set. So I can come over and photograph things. I can be hired to do a drawing. I can do a graphic flyer, so that sort of pays some of the bills. But mostly I just want to do what I do using all the materials and skills and playfulness that I have, which is the best skill of all. Saying I'm not worried about it being right or perfect or even new. I just want it to be resonant so that when you look at it, we know each other better.
Now, that was in the late 70s that you were at the University of Delaware. I'm wondering what your college mates would have said about you. How would they have described you then, and your mindset, if you will, at that age?
Well, I mean, there was as my professor called it, the rubber band theory. A lot of people really expanded during that time period of protests and dress and who you imagined you might be. And then they sort of spring back. But he said some people break the rubber band and keep on running. And so, I tried to include people. I wasn't in competition. So, it was a lot of fun. And I'd like to solve problems. Yeah.
They would have considered you a lot of fun and playful and yet thinking outside of the box. I'm wondering, when the protest mind came in, what were those early influences there? Because there was a lot going on in the 70s.
Well, there was a lot going on in that while I was still in high school, I worked very hard. I actually thought at some point I would go into politics because the world seemed so dire. And I thought, well, maybe, politics needs my help. And I was a political science major for like 1 week. And I said, man, if these people took art, I think that would help the world a lot. But I worked on the age majority legislation. I was very disturbed that they could give people draft numbers who were 18 and they weren't old enough to drink or vote. And I said, this is not even representation. So we got the voting age and drinking age to 18 while I was still in high school. I'm going to Dover, which was the capital of Delaware, and having that be passed into law. They later revised it and made it be age 19 because there was a problem with 18-year-olds being still in high school who were bringing liquor into the school, and that was not safe or wise for the whole group. But, at least you could still vote at 18.
How were you reacting to the political environment then, Flash? Were you rebellious? Were you angry? Were you provocative?
I wanted to explain it. I thought I'm an interpreter. I'm not somebody who goes marching around and shouting. That doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions, but I was doing political cartoons for the school paper. And then one day I just said, I hate Nixon so much. I don't want to draw him. I'm going to do something else with what I draw. But it wasn't like because I gave up on politics. I just thought, I wanted things that were about human nature, that were about how we saw each other, that would be more evergreen than one political idiot saying something stupid and then I go, ho, 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 about that thing. I have the utmost respect for political cartooning. I think they're geniuses, who can distill kind of a frustration and an anger and a clarification that is needed. But I went on to do other kinds of cartoons, and then I got interested in blending like photography and words and making ideas visible. Because I'm more interested in ideas than I am in celebrities. Like for 7 years, I was artist in residence at the New York Public Library in their main branch with the Lions. And I drew over 200 conversations between authors, artists, and provocateurs to make what I called live drawings, so that I recorded my hand drawing this, and I'd maybe make 18 to 20 images of the points in the talk that really spoke to me. And people would always say, well, you're doing caricatures, right? I said, no, what matters to me is how people think, not necessarily what they look like. And so that was a really good blend of my sense of theater, photography, because I called it like taking snapshots with a pen, to make visible thoughts. Because that was what was frustrating about photography to me. Is like, well, that's beautiful. There, the lighting's nice. I can make something look good or have it look tragic. But how to make it have some quality of what an expressive drawing would have? So, I'm not much for abstraction. I like to kind of explain things better to myself, and then if I show it to somebody else and they are kind of intrigued or educated, or even if they want to argue, that's all good with me.
Do you remember what age you were when you first found your way around a camera?
Oh, very clearly. I got a scholarship to be an exchange student in a summer program in France. And my high school graduation gift from Papa was an Instamatic Kodak. And my job there, since I was on a scholarship for the American Legion, was to take pictures and come back and do a slideshow talk. And so I had this little camera, and I loved taking pictures of not the monuments, but I thought when I was at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, what interested me was my feet are by the base of the Eiffel Tower. So I had all these things that were what it felt like to be me in a situation, not what was the expected image. One of the early assignments I did was a show that took place on a DART bus in Delaware. It's the Delaware Area Rapid Transit, which if you put an apostrophe between the D and the A, you have the bus DART. It was the art bus, and it went around different routes, and I took a picture of a dancer in what would categorically be the scenic points in Delaware, but they were personalized. And so she sort of moved in the space, and we played with what we found. And so there's always been a wink and humor in most of the images I do, except for when I'm being respectful to somebody who needs a good portrait. I mean, I don't have to always be me. I like being able to shift in and out of character in order to spend the skill set.
So is this about relationships then, with your images, with the way you perceive things?
I think that's a very good insight. I'm not somebody who says, I'm going to do what I have expression for. It's all for me about sharing. I mean, I also love to cook and invite people over and experiment with food. I usually wake up in the morning and make something, because then I've already accomplished something for the day. Whether it's my own tzatziki or whether I'm making matzo lasagna or I'm making some kind of soup. I mean, and then put it away so it's ready for the end of the day and then continue. But I do like the idea of it's a social activity. For me, my degree ended up saying that I got a BS in graphic design as a Dean's Scholar in Visual Communications. And I got thrown out of the University of Delaware after 3 years because I was all done. I was too arrogant to ask for advice about what courses I should take. Turns out when I went in for my little senior conference, the dean said, well, you're done. You've earned all the credits. And I went, oh man, now I have to get a job and I don't even have a boyfriend. Oh my goodness. And the interesting thing was that now I forgot my train of thought. That happens too, because everything starts going ding, 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 ding. Let's see. It was about noticing this. Repeat your question. I'm sorry.
If you walk into a room and being an extrovert, which clearly you are, is it about you and how you connect to what you're seeing, what your perception, who you're meeting, or is it the bigger picture that you're taking in, or is it all of those things? Or is it the relationship between the people that you're meeting that you're observing as well? Because at some point you might be able to use this material.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one thing. Oh, I remember what I was getting ready to say about visual communications is that when they went to grant me a degree, they can't give you a degree in something they're not accredited for. And so I said I wanted to be visual communications. And now they've renamed the department. It's not called graphic design anymore. And I was like sort of a minor celebrity of somebody who changed the whole focus of that department while getting an enormous amount of trouble for it at the time. But that's sometimes what people who have an idea about how it has to go. I said, anything I'm learning now, I'm not going to particularly use technically in the future. What? Rubber cement, press letters, waxers, all this stuff I learned. None of those technologies are used now. And I like new technology because I have this attitude that I tell to friends who are, my age and older. I say, try not to hate it first. It's not that hard to understand. Oh, good grief. I'm sorry about the ding. So
just coming back to my other question about how you take in a room.
Well, I kind of go, I look for it to see, like one of the things that my pursuit of visual communication, I said, how do you know the things you know when you haven't been told? Like, how is it you walk into a party and you decide to go talk to that person? What makes you go into a department store and they've got all this merchandise and you touch that sweater? What guides it? So I'm always sort of quizzing myself about how I'm in the situation. And one of the things is it's not like trying to win people over. I don't think I have a performance personality per se. I do think I, use performance. And in fact, I used it to learn how to write because I wanted to watch how words landed on people. And that was a good way to understand how to be more concise, how to be able to say what you mean and then stop. Don't over talk it. And understand that the work I'm doing exists to connect. I'm not making decoration for the wall. I'm not making decoration for the brain. I mean, I'm making like, what are we thinking now? What is it that's going on that we need to pay attention to in order to get to a more advanced, distinct, or humorous thought?
So it's a combination of intuition and instinct, but there's not always an answer, is there, to those things that we are not introduced to, that we have to figure it out ourselves. There's not always an answer.
Right. I don't think that it's either or, it's and that's kind of the way it's been for me because I absolutely like my solitude. I cross off on all those forms. You have to put single, married, divorced, widowed. I cross off single and put independent. I don't think single like I'm a piece of cheese that doesn't have a sandwich yet, like a Kraft single. I just think that I'm so tuned in when I'm out. I think I have a little bit of what I call princess in the pea syndrome. If somebody was in my house, they'd be moving my things around, and I can keep a very cluttered art studio because I know where everything is. I have, not boastfully so, just strategically in order to keep track of my things, I have a photographic memory. So if somebody comes here and they move something, it's gone. I've always been in love. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in other people, but I really do like having my own space. I figure I live simultaneously with others. I don't have to live with them in my house.
Sometimes we think of being independent as because we've been let down. So often we prefer to be independent, and that makes us more strongly independent. I'm wondering, since you've not been married, you told me you have been in love, though. Is that also self-preservation?
That's an interesting theory. I think it's as a 70s person, I was with somebody for 10 years, and at that time I said, we're not going to get married till everybody who's in love can get married. So it was kind of a political statement. It wasn't particularly running away or running towards. It was just kind of a way of, if somebody is with me and they want to leave, I'll pack them a lunch. That doesn't mean I'm whimsical about it. I take people's feelings very seriously, especially people who, have gotten involved with me. But I just thought that I'm in the world and maybe I'm a friend slut. Who knows? I just have a lot of people who probably think I'm their best friend. And honestly, I am. I mean, they are to me too. And I think that I think in the future, one of the classes I taught was called Future Nostalgia at Cooper Union, about documenting the anticipated past. And I had people think about what was going on 100 years ago, what was going on 10 years ago, what might be in your home 10 years from now, what about 100 years from now, and thinking about all these things. That's playful for me, so I don't feel like I have to particularly follow social rules without being angry at them or sarcastic about it or trying to interpret what is psychologically wrong with me. I think I became extremely independent because of my mother and father. My father was in a hospital for about 2 years, and this is when my younger sister was born. And I became at age 9, I made the lunch, I helped with dinner, I took the garbage out, and I got the message that we are all able to do whatever we need, and you don't need to get married or even necessarily have a partner to be whole, that you're whole as your whole self. And I kind of like living that way. And if somebody turned up tomorrow and I was in love with them, I would change my mind and say, okay.
You mentioned the teaching. I wanted to come to that. And obviously your educational background with your mother and your father to some extent. So what do you enjoy about teaching? Is there a part of that that's a performance as well, that you enjoy that element of it?
Yeah. I like coming up with challenges so that people think differently. Like one of the things when you teach in art school or Cooper Union, I taught at the University of Delaware, at Temple University, do you teach photography? Are you teaching drawing? I said, I'm not teaching a technological skill. I'm teaching how to perceive something. Then you can fulfill the assignment as an essay, as a photo, as a drawing, or any of the above. One of the classes that I enjoyed teaching, because Cooper Union was sort of focused at the time I was there on, urban focus, urban studies. And so I taught classes for several years. It took place entirely in the New York City subways, because I thought this is like a paradise for noticing. Like everybody's in a subway car. And they all look like they're bored or not paying any attention, and everyone knows exactly what's going on. There's some disturbance, we're tuned in. And I thought this is an interesting place to play noticing games. And so for me, the fun of teaching was coming up with assignments that got students to think differently and think of themselves as more creative, and more inventive, and that they weren't trying to do it right. They were trying to do it in a way that was true to how they were looking out of their own mind. For example, we did one of the first assignments for the subway games was called Jazz Noticing. So we get on the subway at Astor Place, and we're going up to 96th Street, and all the way up, you have to notice everything around you in bits and drabs and sentence fragments, things you overheard. Write it down as fast as you can in a notebook. Then when we turn around to come back to the school, think of everything you're thinking about, worrying about, thinking you should do, thinking that what you want to eat, whatever it is, your internal discussion. And then they had to make a portrait of that trip between the outside and the inside. And they could cut apart text, they could take pictures, they could do drawings. And it was interesting because then they started to understand that art supplies were a way of expressing that wasn't some virtuosity you had to have for drawing or taking pictures. Everybody, I made them all draw. And if you ask a group of adults to draw, I can't draw. Oh, I can't draw. I said, you could draw in second grade. What happened? So they had to draw the person in front of them. If that person got up and left, you would continue drawing the person with whoever sat there next. And then if the seat was empty, you drew the seat. And at the end of the ride, you had a portrait of the monster that sat across from you. And it was great fun, my favorite game on the subway is something called Subway Noticing Games, which is you're sitting there with a group of strangers. What are you wondering about the people around you? Like, look at the shoes, guess the face. Look at the face, guess the shoes. Although the thing that triggered my wanting to teach this was a game I called Nuclear Subway. Let's say there's a terrible, terrible nuclear accident, and the only people left on Earth are in your subway car. You have to pick one person to mate with to continue the human race. Now, this isn't about biology. It's who in the car do you have an affinity with? And you go, ooh, well, he's cute, but she's reading, and it was a way of people figuring out who they were by how it is they perceive. And that was really fun for me as a teacher.
And so how important is the teaching now to all the other things that you do?
Well, I don't really teach anymore. Well, there was a pandemic, and so there was no in-person teaching. And at one point, I wanted to do the assignments more than the students did. And also now teachers are hired more likely for their advanced tech skills in Photoshop and other, in AI and things like that. So I'm content now just to be able to do my work, and I'll do workshops or things like that. But last summer I had a couple of art residencies where I was teaching visual humor. And the thing about teaching visual humor is that we notice so many more funny things in a day than we can express. And so I sort of came up with a whole series of exercises so people could be nurturing being funny without trying to be funny or without telling jokes, and everybody felt more clever and wittier and more possible. And that was, and I had adults in my classes. I even had kids in classes. I have, again, like art is for play. That doesn't diminish it. Like people sometimes think you're not as serious if you do something funny. But I think that evidences a kind of extra thinking that you can be serious and funny, and that the funny is being bemused at the absurdity of life, which is kind of relates to what I've been working on now, in that for 8 years I was helping to manage care for my parents who were in dementia. And I hate the word dementia. I want to change the word to being in a new dimension, spell dementia with an N. Because my mother, she wasn't demented. There are certain political characters who I can assert are demented. My mother just lost one of the laws of physics. She lost a sense of time. So it was interesting to play games with her to understand, to help her not have as much anxiety about this, and I call her like Mom, the genius of now. And it doesn't mean you just say, oh, the glass is on the table and you're wearing socks. Like we would hear a bird and I say, what color do you think that bird is from its song? So she still had the ability to be creative. And so a lot of my preparation to teach in colleges and workshops was really put to use to help make the time I had with my mother, when people are like, oh my God, this is terrible, they're in dementia, I'd never want to be that way. You don't know what you're going to want until you're in a situation. And she liked feeling the air on her cheek. She liked seeing the faces of her children. And I liked figuring out how to make the day be interesting. She also seemed to have cured me of an overriding ambition. Like it was okay to just be. And, these 8 years happened like between 2014 and 2019. And then I'm thinking finally she passes. We're in a moment of what I call grief and relief. And then there's a pandemic. And so that has changed where I think I am in the world, what gives me satisfaction, what it is I put out there. And I'm reevaluating it all now. And that to me seems like a good thing, even though some people might interpret it as lazy. Like, what? You're not keeping up this pitch of producing and showing and inviting people. Maybe that's not always needed. Sometimes, lots of people do their work in order to get known. But I'm more interested in what I get to know than in who gets to know me.
Back in 2011, you were awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship. So tell me how that impacted you and your career at that time and how you utilized it.
Well, that was, when they call you before they publish it and they tell you, we're telling you this and don't tell anyone. What? And the first thing I said at that call was, I can't believe it. Not because I didn't think I deserved it, but that because my career is all over the place, usually it's very specific. Someone's a film video person, someone's a photographer, someone's a writer. They have the categories. And Ed Hirsch, who made the call, said, I wish we could give more of these to people like you who are using all kinds of resources in order to create a statement. So I was going to make a film based on a one-woman show that toured around for about a decade, something called Camping in the Bewilderness, and I ended up renaming it something like, thinking at the speed of, or something at the speed of thought. And I walked in and out of like 800 slides, and I was going to make a movie of it. And then I realized that was too much related to film and a kind of idea. And then I didn't do that and just started doing cartoons and other types of things. And what I like about the Guggenheim is they said, you're using this to figure out where you need to go next. So it's not that you have to dump a bottle of shampoo on the table and say, well, this is the mix that I did. Said, you have proven that you've done enough stuff in your career in order to earn this. Whatever you need to do next, we trust that that's what you need to do. And that was an incredible gift to have the acknowledgement, and to, it helped also that I could continue to do the work I was doing at the New York Public Library, because I was not paid by them to do that. I mean, if you're dealing with library budgets and you have to lay off librarians, there certainly is not going to be a budget for an artist in residence. So the way I was able to coordinate that was I would find third-party funding and then give them a little commercial slide, a little, credit slide at the end of the different animations that I made. I would take a 90-minute talk and make let's say, anywhere from a 4 to 8 minute little summary of it, so that you could get the top points and have. What was interesting is I was just really wanted to learn how it is we listen to things, how ideas came to us. So there was this whole evolution of, first I was drawing just everything on one big piece of paper, and at the end it looked like gift wrap. And I said, when you listen to a talk, that's not what it looks like. You have one idea, then another idea, then another idea, and I was trying to make a portrait of what it's like to learn. So that's some of what I did with it as well.
Now let's talk about music, the soundtrack of your life. This evolves, doesn't it? I think we go through phases in life. Would you say you embrace a multitude of genres now, and that music is important to you because it clearly has played an important role? Is it a soundtrack? Is it something that you could actually write a book about? This is the soundtrack of my life by Flash Rosenberg.
It's a soundtrack, but actually when I'm working, I don't really play music because it's pretty loud in my mind. So I don't have music on in the background particularly. I just am struck by certain songs and what they mean at a certain point. My brother, who I'm very close to, he's 2 years younger, he's the musician. When we got this piano after the house robbery, we had to take piano lessons. And as a sort of constitutional visual artist, once I figured out the notes and I knew what the song sounded like, I was done. He liked playing it over and over again to get it different textures and different sounds and different boogie-woogies to the whole thing. And I wanted a new piece of paper to start a new drawing. And so we kind of divided the world up between what boys do and what girls do. Like I said, boys like dark meat, girls like light meat. I liked vanilla. He liked chocolate. He did piano. I did drawing. I mean, we divided things up like that, but I've always been really interested in music and how songs mean something. I mean, one of the most hilarious moments while I was drawing at the New York Public Library was when Jay-Z was speaking, and there was a writer from Talk of the Town from the New Yorker who sort of plopped himself near my little table. And then there was a young 14-year-old who just begged and begged to get let in, and she was there, and I gave her some paper. I said, you can draw too. And they're like, oh, she won't like rap music. I'm some old lady. I said, no, I like rap music. I mean, I love that song by Nelly going, it's getting hot in here. I mean, it's getting hot in here, so take off your clothes. That seems very sensible. They're like, but how would you know about rap music? I said, oh, I photographed bar mitzvahs, and that was my street cred. And it was one of the few times I said a funny thing and was not aware of it. But I just like when there's an invented sound or something that, as I tell my brother, I like squiggly and boing boing music. So even though I have a lot of genres in the list that I provided, that I said this is the kind of music I like, they all have a kind of jaunt to them or a mood. Although I think my main thought about music was something I heard Paul Simon say in an interview at a New Yorker festival, where he said, when you're in your teens and 20s, music is so important to you. He said, because all your life you have all the emotions you're going to have. A baby has as many emotions as you have when you're 80. He said, but you don't have a way of communicating it. And when you're in your teens and 20s, you don't have the stories and experiences with other people to hang it on. And then by the time you're in your 30s, 40s and more, you're in love, you broke up, you got a job, you have kids, you have things. So you have other things that your emotions are connected to. So you don't need pop music as much. And I thought that was a very interesting interpretation of what happens. But I like hearing different genres, so I keep up to a degree. When I say keep up, maybe some of the music I think is modern was done in the early, aughts. So I may not be as up to date as I think I am.
But you're open to keeping up to date and following what's going on in the world in terms of trends and also technology. You mentioned you're keeping up with that too. So what's your take on AI? Does it bother you? Do you embrace it?
I think as I do when I go to photo, I'm not going to form an opinion till I know more about it. I think there's some wonderful qualities and there's some bad qualities. Pretty much anything has that as an interpretation. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing on some level. I think the dangerous part of falsifying people's voices, I mean, the untruthfulness of it, that's worrisome. I don't know how we're going to work that out, but it seems like things happen and then we come up with a way of figuring it out. Now, I don't know how much I tend to be around people who want to evaluate, criticize, not automatically believe. So I'm probably sheltered from people who will just buy any kind of ridiculous thing they're hearing without questioning it. But I question almost everything.
And no doubt you question politics too. We talked about the political landscape in the 70s being very different to now, in some ways the same. But without drilling too deep, how does the politics of the day impact your art?
I think it impacts it by me wanting to not amplify certain people that should never be in the news. So I pay attention to literature, humorists, movie, almost anything but this scramble for fame that politicians who are hell-bent on destroying everything and having limited ideas. I mean, I don't want to have them in my brain. I mean, this is going to sound, I don't know if I can, I can say it. I mean, what I hate about Trump is that I never wished for anyone to die. I actually want that guy to die. And not because I wish him ill, but I want to see how big a font the New York Times uses on the front page for Trump dead. That's all. I mean, it's just like a font question. It's not really me now getting arrested by his minions for saying something negative.
The font of life and a font of wisdom. All right, let's talk about literature since we can, because we've covered just about everything else, Flash. What's on your bookshelves? What's on your nightstand?
A lot of books that I have trouble getting to because, I mean, the pandemic introduced me to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. And I feel like I moved to Harlem after 30 years in Midtown, where I got priced out and the building was sold. And so I landed in Harlem in 2017. And I've just been watching every kind of film to learn more about my neighbors and Black history and things like that that was not particularly covered when I was growing up. I have a big stack of books. I mean, I like, I have the Moth has these collections of stories, and people give me books, and but I don't. What happens is, here's where my relationship with books, it got skewed. I had 42 boxes of books packed that I was going to take from Midtown to my new place in Harlem, and they began asbestos abatement on the roof while I was legally still there. So they're hacking through, and all this debris and soot and I presume poison is wafting down on top of all these boxes that are all stacked. Some were going to be moved because I had a whole library of photo books, because when I was first teaching photo history, you had to take slides from books. There wasn't a photo history master list. You had to come up with your own material to teach. And I go up on the roof. There's 8 guys in hazmat suits, and I'm screaming like a banshee. I don't even know how banshees scream, but apparently that might have been a worn cliche. And I'm like, what? I'm calling the police. Stop it. They go, oh, don't worry, lady. We're going to take care of it. And they used a fire hose to hose down 42 boxes of books. And I lost all my books. And I thought, well, we don't know what to do with the books anyway, so maybe I'm on the forefront of no longer having books. I try to say, well, I'm not happy about it, but if it's what occurs, I'm not going to mope about and say that's, mostly what I read in all those books are in me, and they inform an awful lot of what I do. And I liked, just odd novels. I liked Anais Nin. I liked, surrealists. I liked the, Oulipo, which played games with how they wrote in literature. It was a French kind of organization. So it was like this kind of stuff on the edge. I loved surrealism. I liked magical thinking. I liked all that kind of stuff. And I also like books of facts. Right now I seem to be more interested in documentaries, maybe because I want information more than I want to be distracted. Like, I know so many people and their stories and all that. I don't need to read about a family that's fictionalized anymore. That doesn't have much interest to me. Also, a lot of the books are friends of mine write books, and then, oh, good grief, now I have to read them. And blessings on that. That's one of the joys of being in the community I live in here in New York. A lot of people produce a lot of stuff, and I'm seeing friends in shows, friends who write books, friends who do poetry, and that's part of the puddle I love so much being here.
Now that you're in your 70s, one might ask you what's on your bucket list, but I probably would tell me that you're still drawing the bucket.
I have one whimsical thing. I wish I could be on Law and Order Special Victims Unit. I could just be the dead person at the beginning of the show. But I just love that series because I've had a whole life and I haven't really solved anything, and they solve a thing in 1 hour. It's very admirable.
This is the detective in you coming out again.
Yeah. But I don't have a big plan. I just try to live with health. I mean, it's so funny because 70 is a very interesting age to be, because before this, I would not tell people my age. I wasn't particularly coy about it. They could find out. It's on the internet. But now I run around boasting about it. Hey, I'm 70, and it's a freedom. I'm not expected to do things. I have a 9-year-old grandfriend. He's not my birth grandson, but he's a close friend of mine. And, and we get to compare our lives. And that to me is really interesting. And I think I just want to continue to be playful, to be helpful, to be insightful, and keep my mind sharp by doing things that entertain others in a thoughtful way, not entertain like, hey, yabba dabba doo, like just really a new, keep coming up with new ways to think about things, that don't hate it first.
When you close the door and turn the phone off at the end of the day, Flash, what do you do to unwind, and where does your satisfaction come as you're unwinding?
I think I'm easily distractible, so I unwind almost in seesaws during the day because I have a democracy of interests in things. I'm just as interested in cooking a meal as I am in doing a cartoon as I am in answering an email. Like, I just find the details of life interesting. So it's not like there's suddenly now I have to wind down. I mean, I fortunately don't have any sleep issues. I just hope to be awake as much as possible. But I learned how to sleep from my dolls. Then back then, when the doll was sitting up, her eyes were open, and when she was lying down, her eyes were closed. And I wake up at about 4 a.m. and start in. I love being awake while it's still dark, and I can kind of welcome the light coming in. That to me is a big pleasure.
So you're early to bed?
Yeah, well, sometimes I'm up so early in the morning, people think I'm a night person, but I don't even like go to bed. I sort of fall asleep. I think, well, I'm going to read for a while. I'm going to watch something. I fight it like a little kid who doesn't want to sleep. But of course I sleep, and I wake up first thing and go swim laps. That to me is a great, great joy. Just being able to move and the company, like I'm in the Harlem Y, where there's a group of the early morning swimmers. And there's something so wonderful about seeing people just in passing like that we are friends that salute each other for the day. That may be more satisfying than winding down. That's like winding up.
I read somewhere that you were regarded as the official doodle clown for the New York Clown Theatre Festival. Is that how you would like to be described? Do you have a phrase that would be your legacy?
I don't think that would be a legacy. That was a playful thing to do. But I just think, doing the live drawing, I used to always say, this is not a question of stump the doodle monkey. Like, if I can't think of what to draw, it may be that the person's not speaking clearly enough about what it is they wish to communicate. So it's a two-way thing. I mean, being the doodle clown at the festival, it was just a wonderful thing to draw people in performance and capture their whimsy and their originality. That was, to me, very, very exciting. And I liked, being one of the first photographers, a woman photographer in Delaware. I mean, I was photo editor of the Delaware Today magazine in like 1981, I think, or 80. And I looked about 12 years old. I think I was about 23. And I would show up and, people for the story would say, well, where's the real photographer? Meaning the guy. And I was a laughing feminist, not an angry one. And I said, I'm it. And they said, well, don't you have a big camera bag and stuff? I said, no, if I have to get close, I'll run up. And if I have to back up, I'll back up. And it was just this sort of playful way of noticing and being in time. And now I've lost why I went off on that tangent, but it was you were asking about.
Well, I'm also wondering now, given all the things that you do, if you would ever regard yourself as retiring. I can't imagine you would retire. You just continue to live the life that you're enjoying.
Yeah. I mean, I had a job. I retired in 1979, and I've been doing what I've wanted since then. And so I don't even understand the concept of retiring.
Yeah. I figured as much.
Yeah. I mean, I guess once I lose a certain cognitive or physical ability to do things, and I'll probably think of something else. It's problem solving, and I think that's a little bit where, let's say, my father's scientist mind came in. I come from, there's a lot of chemical engineers and scientists in the family, and I just think I'm like a visual scientist.
What are you looking forward to most of all this year? What your plans are?
What am I looking forward to? Well, I really was looking forward to talking to you. I mean, I think that any time that there's an engagement and an interest, that matters, So, this is, I can't believe somebody's at my door.
Well, there's a good cue for us to wrap up and for me to thank you so much for your time today, Flash, and for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate your questions. They were thoughtful and they followed the trajectory, even when I can't follow the trajectory. So I really appreciate your helping me understand more about what I'm doing and who I am. That's a real gift to give to any artist, and I thank you very much.
And if you scroll down the show notes below the podcast player, you'll find links to Flash's social media, her website, and also to some of the exhibitions that she mentioned. I hope you'll join us on Instagram. We're at the AART Podcast. Don't forget that's art with 2 A's. And as always, you can reach me via email at hollowellstudios@gmail.com. My thanks again to my guest this week, Flash Rosenberg, and to you for listening. I'll be back next week when my guest will be the coloured pencil artist Paulette Pearson. So I do hope you'll join me then.